From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today was the second day of the Alabama legislature's regular session, but the Capitol was still abuzz over Governor Kay Ivey's State of the State address last night. The governor talked about an array of issues, but she closed the speech calling on the legislature to join her in addressing violent crime. That elicited a bipartisan response.
Bolstering public safety is my #1 priority for this session. And I am proud to partner with Speaker Ledbetter and a bipartisan group of legislators in putting forward a package of bills that will back the blue and combat inner city gun violence. To back the blue, we will provide law enforcement with enhanced legal protections that allow them to carry out their duties courageously and effectively without fear of Monday morning quarterbacking in the courts. We will support long-serving law enforcement families through dependent scholarships. Y'all, our men and women in blue put everything on the line, and they need to know Alabama has their backs. We will crack down on inner city violence by enhancing penalties for dangerous fellows with guns. We will expand the NILS law, boost our successful metro area crime suppression unit, ban Glock switches, and we will enhance supervision of high-risk juveniles. Working together, we will create a safer Alabama.
We got our first look today at the governor's budgets. Under the Constitution, the governor is required to submit a proposed budget to the legislature on the second legislative day. Finance Director Bill Poole held a briefing with reporters explaining how the state will be returning to more normal budget levels after years of revenue being enhanced by federal COVID relief dollars. While both the general fund and the education trust fund remain in strong financial shape, Poole emphasized the need for a more cautious approach as lawmakers begin the budget deliberation process.
We have had really the best of times in both budgets for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so this is a normalization back to historic norms. And so I think it is important to have that context within this discussion. We've anticipated that these anomalies would not sustain. On the general fund side, it's really driven by the income derived from interest on state deposits, and I showed, as did Kirk Fulford today, the historical norms there and how we've been, far from the historical norm. And then on the education side, we've seen several consecutive years of 20% plus growth. Our normal growth, receipts growth average year over year is 3 to 4%. We're projecting in FY26 less than 2% receipts growth in the ETF. So we are concerned because we have to be mindful and anticipate those changes, but they are not surprises, and they are also reflective with the context of, we've seen inflated revenues into both budgets over recent years.
Of course, it is the legislature that must take up the budgets and take them through the arduous process of being enacted. Today, members of the House and Senate Education Budget Committees heard from agency heads about their budget requests and what funds are needed for what projects.
The presentation, we kind of knew what was going to be said, and that is the state general fund is going to be kind of a tight year, not a disaster year, but it's going to be tight. And then on the education side, we're seeing revenues trend back to the norm, so we don't have a lot of the flexibility that we used to have. So, but all in all, you heard the Legislative Fiscal Office Director say Alabama is in the best shape among the states, our sister states across the country. So it's a good sign we've been doing things right. Again, on the general fund side, a lot of challenges that they have, and with Medicaid going up, corrections and the move in corrections going up, and other the CHIPS program going up. That's the Children's Health Insurance Plan. So they've got a lot of challenges beyond their control. We didn't create them here in Alabama, but they certainly are going to need to be very mindful of those increased costs that are coming forward.
One of Governor Ivey's top priorities from last night's speech is a sweeping reorganization of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Ivey is now pushing to integrate the department directly into her administration. The proposal would elevate the Veterans Affairs Commissioner to a cabinet-level position while reducing the size of the Veterans Board. Today, in the Senate Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, Senator Andrew Jones introduced a bill to enact these reforms. The measure passed the committee, though it did face some pushback from within the Republican ranks.
That just brought a lot of issues and concerns to light in the fact that, we have to have someone that works and coordinates hand in hand with the governor's office. Ultimately, that's got to happen. And I think this bill helps assure that that happens. And it's also going to, increase involvement from other veterans groups.
Veterans on the street, a lot of them are very concerned about. They feel like that they may be losing some touch in some areas. So I think there just needs to be some work in education or some adaptations that may need to be made before this comes to the floor.
Just seems like they would like to have a little input into that to understand kind of what the direction is. I know it's been thought out, but my concern is just with theirs. We have a large veteran community there in Senate District 31. So, I hope to work with you, if this gets through committee to, hopefully we can listen to the stakeholders and, make changes that are favorable to them.
I'll speak with Senator Jones in more detail later in the show. The House Judiciary Committee today advanced a bill that would impose an automatic death sentence for anyone convicted of child rape. State Representative Matt Simpson is a former prosecutor who has worked child rape cases himself. He says the existing maximum penalty of life in prison doesn't go far enough. His bill originally applied to those convicted of raping a child younger than 6, but State Representative Chris England introduced an amendment that would raise that applicable age to 12 and under. That amendment was approved unanimously by the committee.
I have prosecuted these cases. I have prosecuted cases for my time in Baldwin County for 4.5 years. This was my specialty. I prosecuted cases where children were the victim of rape and sexual offenses. I've prosecuted cases where children under the age of 6 were the victims of these rapes. This is the worst of the worst offense to me. This is more, if somebody gets mad and kills somebody, I can see that more than someone that rapes and takes the innocence away of a child that young. That person is not rehabilitatable. That person cannot get back in the streets. This is not something where they're saying, oh, if I just had some treatment, I'll be back. That person will never be able to be rehabilitated. In my opinion, since this is the worst of the worst offenses, it needs the worst of the worst punishment.
We've talked for weeks about how immigration would be a big topic in this year's legislative session, especially given the dramatic change in enforcement at the federal level. That process started today in the Senate State and County Government Committee, where lawmakers took up a number of bills related to immigration and immigrants. One bill would impose a fee on wire transfers going out of the country in an effort to deter the practice of migrants working here and sending money back to their home countries. Another bill would require state and local law enforcement to collect DNA and fingerprints from any illegal alien they arrest to assist in the federal deportation process. And another bill would make it a state crime to harbor or conceal an illegal alien. Those bills advanced through committee, but not before receiving pushback from those who came to the State House to voice their concern.
This bill, as well as all of the other anti-immigrant bills, are only going to deter me from wanting to stay in Alabama and pursue my higher education, as well as thousands of other students who are wanting to do the same, because we want to be on the right side of history. I'm asking all of you, do you want to be on the right side of history? We have an extensive history in Alabama of racial discrimination, and this bill will only create, will only justify the need for racial profiling.
We have a DNA database. We're already putting Americans in. We already have all that. We're adding just one more group to this database. It's not, I think, with the media sensation, this is not what I heard on some of the people up here. I'm not trying to do any of that. We're adding just one little paragraph into what we already have. So we're not creating anything that we're changing just because you're illegal. We're doing it already.
Early this morning, lawmakers, cabinet members, and politicos of all stripes gathered for the first of this year's Alabama Daily News Legislative Issues Breakfast Series. This event featured my panel conversation with House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter, Senate President Pro Tem Garland Gudger, and House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels. We talked about a lot of issues, but as an interesting twist for a crowd that included a lot of lobbyists, I asked what advice the leaders had for those who come to them advocating legislation. Gudger had some simple advice. Be straight up and tell the whole story.
I believe the two gentlemen to my right are character-driven and sound advice that they just gave. The only thing I want to add to that is bring any type of bills, legislation, obviously into me or to my office. Give me the full picture. Some of you do, some of you don't, just to be honest with you. Now, from that gives us that full who's against it. How much is this really going to cost? Have we thought through diligently to make sure there's not unintended consequences? And if there is, what are those unintended consequences? Give me the full picture. We will make an educated decision. And there is no doubt that I have some of the finest men and women in the Alabama State Senate that are up there for the right reasons and the intent of being there and their motives for being there are to help Alabama. So if you give them the full picture, they're going to make a good decision. But don't give us half of the information and expect us to make a good decision.
I want to thank those legislative leaders for their time and candor this morning, and I want to thank everyone who attended to make it a quality event. Coming up after the break, I'll sit down with State Senator Andrew Jones to talk more about his bills impacting veterans this session. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Getting my hands dirty is the best part of my job. My name is Hannah Rogers, and I am an A&P mechanic, which is an airframe and power plant mechanic. I can work on anything from general aviation to helicopters. I was a young mother. I was 18 when I became pregnant. I never thought that I could finish school, work, and raise my son. But with the government's assistance with food stamps, Section 8, child care, all of those programs have helped me achieve this goal to where I don't have to live off assistance anymore. I was able to graduate debt-free by the Pell Grant, the WIOA program, and also a scholarship. I actually had friends tell me about the program, the WIOA program, and so then I also spoke with the SSS instructor at our school, and she told me to contact the Career Center, and I was able to set up an appointment and fill out the application and all the prereqs for that. With the WIOA program providing for my scholarship for school, along with the Pell Grant, that all gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to reach my goals and be where I am today without those programs. You don't just have to stay in poverty because you was born in poverty. You can move up in life. Just because you don't have the money doesn't mean that you can't get there. There's a lot of opportunities out there. There's scholarships, there's programs, there's people. You just have to show that you're willing to do the hard work. I was determined. I refused to allow anything to stop me.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Andrew Jones from Gadsden. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Good to be with you.
Well, you've had a busy day. Really the first committee day of the legislative session. You chaired the Veterans Affairs Committee in the Senate. Had a big meeting. Y'all had a lot on the agenda, but I'm going to kind of back up and ask you about the governor's speech. Sure. First of all, you got a shout out in it. You got personally name checked about the veterans issue. She talked about her, prioritizing this Veterans Resource Center. So, what was your reaction to that? What did you think about her speech and specifically her prioritizing Veterans Affairs?
Well, I thought the governor hit it out of the park, Todd. She really brought the focus home to a lot of different issues that are important to Alabamians, but she really emphasized veterans and taking care of veterans, and I think these bills we're going to talk about do just that. I think it's putting a focus in the spotlight on veterans that has long been needed in our state. We've obviously been making progress on military issues. We're considered one of the top military-friendly states in the U.S., and number two for military veterans to retire and live in a state. Alabama ranks number 2. So we're making progress, and we're going to continue working on that, and just appreciate the governor's leadership.
And of course, highlighting her guests, State of the State, that was a big emotional moment, really the biggest emotional moment of the night. Okay, talk about this Veterans Resource Center. It was in her speech. You have legislation. What's the concept?
Yeah, we really need a one-stop shop for veterans to go and get access to either helping them find a job, to benefits, to mental health services. We need a place they can go. And we're kind of calling this a hub and spoke model because we've got a lot of organizations, a lot of entities around the state that support veterans, but there really needs to be some coordination of effort, and there needs to be one place that a veteran can go and get assistance that kind of coordinates with all these others. And so it's a public-private partnership. We expect it to be located in Montgomery here, and that's going to be seeded with some money from the state, but eventually will be totally run by private dollars.
Okay. So if I am a veteran and maybe I'm seeking employment, need some help figuring out credentials or something like that, that's one of the resources that would provide?
That's right. That would be a place you could go to get assistance in helping transition from military life into public life or private life with a different employment, but utilizing those skills that you learned in the military.
Well, what are we hearing? Do you think that's going to be a successful, it's kind of hard to argue with, especially if it's long-term going to be financed by itself.
Definitely. I haven't heard of anyone having an issue, and it's hard to imagine anyone having an issue with helping veterans and serving veterans. So this is just a bill that's long been needed, but it's time that we kind of consolidate efforts and pull those in the same direction.
Also, your legislation, and the governor mentioned this too, restructuring the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs. We don't have to go into all the drama that happened, right, but it was a rocky year, right, for the VA here, ending up with the dismissal of the director. So you've talked about, the governor's talked about, this organization needs to be restructured, but also you used the word I found interesting, elevating that director person to a cabinet level to really give them a seat at the table. That's interesting. So you have legislation to do that, and it's starting to move?
Yes, it's starting to move. We got it out of committee today. There were some questions, obviously, from members trying to wrap their heads around what the differences would be. One would be a more streamlined board. The current board has 17 members, and they are required to be largely from veteran service organizations. The vast majority of veterans are not represented by a veteran service organization, so we want to have
those are like VFW, American
Legion, yes, all those. So we want to have a more inclusive board that reflects the full array of military personnel, branches of service, regions of the state, just a diverse array of folks that are able to come to the table. Also, we want a more streamlined board. We're taking it from 17 to 9. And this would become an advisory entity, much like several other state agencies. Mm-hmm. So you think about the ABC board, think about the mental health board, think about the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. All of those have the same model where they have a commissioner who directly reports to the governor, who answers to the governor, the buck stops with her, and then you have a board that's in an advisory capacity that's helping bring in the folks that are experts in the field, or in this case with veterans, people who have been there and served our state in that capacity and understand what it means to help veterans. So I really think this, you used the right word, elevates the position by taking and making it a cabinet level agency and making the buck stop with the governor.
Yeah, and I find that, I mean, look, it just sounds like a normalization of the department. Most agencies operate like this. And if anybody understands the chain of command, it's veterans themselves. But do you think that these reforms to the Veterans Affairs Department will really help it meet the needs of veterans throughout the state if we can get these across the finish line?
I do. I think anytime you have someone sitting in a room with the governor, that's only a good thing. This will help raise those issues up to the gubernatorial level, help bring them into the full fold of state government and help advocate for the issues that are important to veterans. So the Department of Veterans Affairs is already under interim commissioner Newton doing a stellar job, but I think this will allow him to do even more and bring the full resources of state government to bear.
Well, and also, there's going to be another governor in 2 years with a new cabinet and all that. And so, maybe trying to recruit somebody, I'd rather, it's more attractive to be a member of the governor's cabinet, know you're going to be plugged in to that administration rather than, kind of a quasi situation. So I'll be watching that bill, and I think everybody will. Let's talk about veterans' mental health, because that was part of what the dust-up was all about. Miscommunication, and just kind of going rogue on some of those mental health issues, especially as it pertained to ARPA funds. Mm-hmm. So y'all passed a bill creating this Veterans Mental Health Steering Committee. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of committees and task forces and commissions and things that get formed, and they do some work and have some meetings, but what comes out is sometimes pro forma, going through the motions a little bit. I've been to most every one of these meetings. That is not the case. I've been really impressed by the depth, the thoroughness, to the fact where it's just over my head how much data they're talking about. So, since it was your bill, talk about, reflect on that. They've moved quickly, they've moved thoroughly. Have you been pleased with the progress so far?
Yes, it is one of the most aggressive task forces that I've served on, in that we are moving quickly. We're not just meeting to meet, we're working through all the data. There have been a lot of good recommendations that have come out of those meetings. In particular, there's going to be a bill that I believe Senator Kelly will carry on safe storage of firearms for veterans who might have mental health issues or might have concerns about safety of their ability to handle a weapon and some things of that nature. There's obviously was a recommendation on the legislation to create the Veterans Resource Center that we just talked about.
Okay, so that came out of the committee.
Well, it kind of was brought to the committee discussed it and voted to recommend it and support it. So, all of those type of things, as well as the report that we're going to have at the conclusion. We're due to have a report to the governor, I believe, by July, and she'll have an opportunity to review that and sign off on that. And that's going to be a plan to cover the treatment of all veterans across the state with their mental health needs. And so I'm very, very pleased at how all this has been working.
The data is so important, and that's why, look, these meetings have lasted 2-3 hours, but they're going through data. The reason I think that's so important is how can you adequately or effectively address a problem unless you truly know what the problem is statistically using that data? So do you think that's been a difference maker in terms of, some really smart consultants and everything going deep into the data to identify what the problems are?
I do. If you follow the data and you have someone who's very smart and can lead you in the right direction in finding the data first, but then following where it leads, then your recommendations they have an overwhelming chance of success, in my opinion, because you've followed the breadcrumbs, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. It's just the beginning of the session. It's going to be a long one. Thank you for explaining some of these issues. We're going to be following them all, so I hope you'll come back and share the progress.
Definitely would love to. We expect 12 to 15 military bills at least, and so we're going to have a big package this year.
Yeah, you're going to be busy. Okay, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
The quilters of Gee's Bend are world-renowned for their traditional quilt designs. The inhabitants of the small Alabama river town are mostly descendants of enslaved African Americans. Gee's Bend has demonstrated a persistent cultural wealth in the vibrant style of its quilts. Quilt making has a long history in Alabama, and there are no finer examples of this art form than the motifs and craftsmanship of the quilts of Gee's Bend.
What time is it? It's science time! Hi, I'm Mr. C, and today I'd like to introduce you to my new series, DIY Science Time. In partnership with Alabama Public Television, we've created a show that is dedicated to science, technology, engineering, and math. DIY Science Time gets students and families excited about learning and encourages viewers like you to give science a try with a simple DIY. I've been an educator for 19 years, and I know one thing always holds true. Learning science is fun and can be done by everyone. A little bit of guidance mixed together with a DIY activity is the perfect recipe to inspire all of us to explore science in our everyday lives. Fridays at 2:30 p.m. and Saturdays at 9:30 a.m.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.